The rhythmic beeping of checkout scanners, the metallic clatter of shopping carts, and the low hum of fluorescent lights were all part of the symphony at Willow Creek Grocery. For Emma, it was a tune she had heard too many times. She adjusted the frayed green apron tied around her waist, pushed a strand of hair behind her ear, and forced a smile for the next customer in line. She had been working here for 5 years, long enough to memorize every corner of the store and every habit of its regulars. The familiarity was comforting in a way, but also stifling. Each day felt like a loop that never changed. "Morning, Mrs. Green," Emma greeted an elderly woman who came in every Tuesday for the same items: oatmeal, apples, and herbal tea. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace and always had a kind word for Emma. "Good morning, dear," Mrs. Green replied, her eyes twinkling. "How's that brother of yours? Still keeping out of trouble, I hope?" Emma's smile grew more genuine. "He's doing his best. High school's keeping him busy." "You're a good girl," Mrs. Green said as Emma handed her change. "Always so polite. Always working so hard." "Just trying to get by," Emma said softly, a hint of weariness slipping through. Mrs. Green patted her hand before shuffling away, her cart creaking. Emma exhaled as the next customer approached, a man who grumbled about the price of milk. She rang up his items, nodded through his complaints, and moved on to the next. And the next. Hours passed, blending into each other. But as the line thinned, Emma caught sight of him, the man who didn't belong. He was standing near the bread aisle, his gaze fixed on the shelves as if they held some secret he couldn't unlock. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and his clothes were worn but clean. There was a tiredness to him, a quiet weight that made him seem smaller. He lifted a loaf of bread, studied it for a long moment, then put it back and walked away with empty hands. Emma felt a pang of something she didn't want to name. She had seen too many people like him lately, people trying to make a few dollars stretch into meals for the week. "Hey Emma, you okay?" asked Rob, a fellow cashier who had stepped up beside her. He was in his early 20s, with a kind face and a knack for lightening the mood. "You've been zoning out." "Just tired," Emma replied, glancing back toward the bread aisle. The man was gone. "Well, don't forget to take your break," Rob said with a sympathetic smile. "It's been a long morning." Emma nodded. But her mind stayed with the man she'd seen. She knew the feeling of weighing every purchase, the dread that came with seeing a total you couldn't afford. It was a silent, crushing kind of shame, one she had experienced too many times to count. When Emma's break finally came, she stepped outside, savoring the cool air that cut through the midday heat. She sat on a bench behind the store, her eyes closed as she let herself breathe for a moment. Life hadn't always been like this. 4 years ago, before the accident that took her parents, things had been different. Back then, she was a college freshman with dreams of becoming a teacher. Now, she was a guardian, a provider, and a protector, all for her 16-year-old brother Noah. "Emma," a familiar voice called, snapping her out of her thoughts. She opened her eyes to see Rob holding 2 cups of coffee. "Figured you could use this," he said, handing her one. "You've looked beat lately." "Thanks," Emma said, grateful for the gesture. She took a sip, the warmth spreading through her chest. "How's your shift?" "Same as always," Rob replied, leaning against the wall. "Had a guy argue with me for 10 minutes over a coupon that expired last month. Living the dream, you know." Emma chuckled. But her mind drifted back to the man from earlier. "Hey, did you see that guy in the bread aisle? Dark hair, kind of quiet." Rob shook his head. "Can't say I did." "Why?" "Just wondering," Emma said, not wanting to explain. She stood and stretched, handing back the empty coffee cup. "Thanks for this. I should get back." "Take care of yourself," Emma, Rob said, his tone more serious. "You don't have to do it all on your own." Emma nodded but didn't respond. She wasn't sure she believed that anymore. The afternoon rush came and went. When the store finally quieted, Emma found herself scanning the aisles again, half hoping and half dreading that she might see the man. And then, just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, there he was standing at her register, a basket in hand. This time, he had made his choices: bread, a carton of milk, canned soup, and a box of tea. Nothing more. He placed the items on the belt carefully, as if afraid they might break. "Afternoon," Emma said, her voice softening. She scanned the items, watching him out of the corner of her eye. His hands were shaking slightly. "That'll be $12.47, she said, keeping her tone gentle. The man nodded, reaching into his pocket for a thin wallet. He pulled out a debit card, and Emma took it, hoping it would work. But when she swiped it, the machine let out a harsh mechanical beep. Declined. She glanced at him, saw the flash of fear and humiliation in his eyes. "Could you try again?" he asked, his voice rough. "Of course," Emma said. She swiped the card again, but the result was the same. Behind him, a few customers shifted, impatient and uninterested. The man fumbled for another card, but it too was declined. He closed his eyes, his shoulders sagging. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I'll just put it back." "Wait," Emma said, her chest tightening. She didn't think, she just acted. "It's okay, I'll cover it." "No," he said quickly, his voice sharp with shame. "You don't have to." "I know," Emma said firmly. "But please, let me." The man hesitated, torn between pride and desperation. Finally, he nodded, his face crumpling. "Thank you," he whispered, his eyes shining with tears. Emma paid for the groceries, feeling the weight of every dollar she handed over. It wasn't much, but it was money she couldn't really spare. Still, she couldn't have done anything else. When she handed him the bag, she offered a small, encouraging smile. "Take care." He nodded, clutching the bag tightly. "I don't know how to repay you," he said, his voice barely audible. "You don't have to," Emma replied. "Just take care." As he walked out of the store, the automatic doors closing behind him, Emma felt the familiar heaviness settle back in. Life moved on, customers came and went, oblivious to the quiet desperation of the man she had helped. But for Emma, the moment lingered. It was a reminder of how fragile hope could be, and how one small act of kindness could feel like both a burden and a blessing. When Emma's shift ended, the evening sky was painted in deep shades of purple and orange. She walked home through streets lined with aging houses, their worn facades echoing her own exhaustion. Her apartment, a small, two-bedroom unit, wasn't much, but it was home. She unlocked the door and stepped inside, greeted by the familiar chaos of Noah's music blaring from his room. "Noah," she called, setting her bag down. The music stopped, and moments later her brother emerged, grinning. "Hey, how was work?" "Long," Emma said, smiling despite herself. "Same as always." Noah's grin faded. "You look tired." "I'm fine," she lied, ruffling his hair. "How was school?" "Not bad," he said. But there was a tension in his voice. "A few jerks, but it's whatever." Emma's heart sank. She wanted to protect him from everything, from bullies, from the harsh realities of their lives. But all she could do was nod and pretend it wasn't breaking her heart. They made dinner together, simple eggs and toast, and ate in companionable silence. As they cleared the dishes, Emma's thoughts drifted back to the man at the store. She hoped her small gesture had made a difference. But deep down, she knew that sometimes, people needed more than kindness. They needed a lifeline. The next morning, as Emma walked into Willow Creek Grocery, she expected nothing more than another long shift filled with routine transactions and tired smiles. The encounter with the man from yesterday lingered in her mind, but she tried to push it aside. There were bills to pay, and dwelling on it wouldn't make the day any easier. As she stepped through the automatic doors, Emma noticed an unusual buzz among her coworkers. They huddled together, their eyes darting toward the entrance, whispering in hushed tones. Curious, Emma followed their gaze and froze. It was him. The man from yesterday stood near the front of the store. But he looked different. His dark hair was neatly combed, his clothes were fresh and crisp, and he carried himself with a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. He spotted Emma immediately and began walking toward her. She felt her pulse quicken. "Hi," he said when he reached her, his voice steady and calm. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Emma blinked, momentarily at a loss for words. "No, not at all. Are you okay?" "I am," he said, his expression softening. "Because of you." Emma's heart pounded. She glanced around, suddenly aware of the curious eyes of her coworkers and customers. "Do you want to talk somewhere else?" "Sure," the man said, offering a small smile. "If you have a moment." They moved to a quiet corner near the store's side entrance. Emma crossed her arms, unsure of what to expect. "I'm glad you're okay," she said, breaking the silence. "I didn't think I'd see you again." "I wanted to thank you properly," he said, his voice sincere. "You helped me when I needed it most. You didn't know me, but you stepped in anyway. That kind of kindness is rare." "It was just groceries," Emma said, shifting uncomfortably under his intense gaze. "It was more than that," he insisted. "It reminded me that there's still good in the world. I don't know how to explain it, but it meant everything." Emma nodded, unsure of what to say. She had acted on instinct, never expecting anything in return. "My name is Alex Carter," he said, extending his hand. "I should have introduced myself sooner." "Emma," she replied, shaking his hand. "It's nice to meet you officially." "I'd like to repay your kindness," Alex continued, his voice earnest. "I have resources, connections. If you're willing, I'd like to help make things a little easier for you and your brother." Emma's breath caught. Offers like this didn't happen to people like her, not without strings attached. She shook her head, trying to make sense of his words. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I can," Alex said simply. "And because you reminded me that people can still care, even when they don't have to." For a long moment, Emma was silent. She had spent so many years relying on herself, trusting no one but her brother. Accepting help felt like stepping off a ledge. "What are you offering?" "Anything that would make a real difference," Alex said. "For starters, I know you're raising your brother. I have connections to a mentorship program that could open doors for him: scholarships, early college courses, internships. If he's interested, I'd be happy to make the introduction." Emma's chest tightened. Noah's future was the one thing she worried about most. I don't know what to say." "Just think about it," Alex said gently. "No strings. No pressure." "Okay," Emma said, her voice trembling. "I'll talk to him." That night, Emma sat with Noah at their small kitchen table. She explained everything Alex had said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. Noah listened, his eyes wide with a mix of hope and disbelief. "Is this real?" he asked, his voice low. "Like, really real?" "I think it might be," Emma replied, her own voice shaking. "But it's up to you. If you're not interested, we don't have to do anything." "No," Noah said quickly, his eyes shining. "I am. I really am." Emma reached across the table and took his hand. "We'll figure it out together." Over the next few days, Alex kept his word. He arranged for Noah to meet with a mentor from the program, a retired professor with a passion for guiding young people through their educational journeys. The program itself was rigorous, but it was designed to lift students out of difficult circumstances and give them the tools they needed to succeed. Noah threw himself into it, working harder than ever. Emma saw the spark in his eyes, the determination that had always been there but never fully realized. For the first time in a long time, her brother seemed truly hopeful. As Noah's life began to change, so did Emma's. With Alex's encouragement, she met with the director of a nonprofit organization focused on community outreach. The position offered meaningful work connecting struggling families with resources and support, and came with better pay and benefits than her job at the grocery store. During her interview, Emma spoke about her experiences, her drive to make a difference, and the challenges she had faced. She didn't sugarcoat anything, and she wasn't sure if that was what they wanted to hear. "You have a unique perspective," the director said, impressed by her candor. "You understand what our clients are going through. We need people like you." When Emma was offered the job, she hesitated. It was a leap into the unknown, and change had always terrified her. But Alex's words echoed in her mind. "You don't have to do it alone." She took the job. The transition was hard. The work was demanding, sometimes heartbreaking, but Emma found herself growing stronger. She connected with families facing similar struggles, offering them hope and guidance. Her own experiences gave her the empathy and resilience to make a real impact. And every night, when she returned home to her modest apartment, she knew she was building something better, not just for herself, but for Noah. One evening, after a particularly long day, Emma invited Alex over for dinner. She wanted to thank him, even if words felt inadequate. The apartment was small and cluttered, but she took pride in making it warm and welcoming. Together, they ate homemade pasta, sharing stories of their pasts. Alex spoke of his own struggles, how he had once built a successful business only to watch it crumble because he'd lost sight of what truly mattered. Emma listened, understanding all too well how life could change in an instant. "You've done so much for us," Emma said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already have," Alex replied. "You reminded me what kindness looks like." Their bond wasn't built on grand gestures or empty promises. It was rooted in mutual respect, genuine compassion, and the knowledge that sometimes, all it took to change a life was a single act of kindness. For Emma and Noah, it had made all the difference. And as they moved forward together and stronger than before, they knew that their story was only just beginning. In the months that followed, Emma threw herself into her new role at the nonprofit. The work was exhausting: long hours, tough cases, and moments that tested every ounce of her resilience, but it was also deeply rewarding. Each day, she saw how small acts of compassion could create real change. Families who once felt hopeless began to believe in themselves again. Strangers became allies. Little by little, the community grew stronger, one connection at a time. Emma's past experiences became her strength. She used them to relate to the people she helped, offering both practical solutions and empathy that came from lived experience. When a single mother walked into the nonprofit's office, desperate for help after losing her job, Emma listened. She remembered her own fear, the nights spent wondering how she would make it to the next paycheck. Together, they created a plan, a network of resources and steps to help the woman find stable work and housing. "You don't have to do this alone," Emma said, the same words Alex had once spoken to her. And she meant it. Noah's transformation continued as well. The mentorship program pushed him to his limits, but he thrived. He tackled challenging coursework, engaged in debates, and even mentored younger students who struggled. For the first time, he began to see a future that wasn't defined by scarcity and struggle. He came home one day with a letter in hand, a letter offering him early admission to a prestigious college preparatory program. When he showed it to Emma, his eyes were wide with a mix of disbelief and joy. "It's happening," he said, his voice trembling. "I'm really doing it." Emma hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "You've worked so hard, Noah. You deserve this." They celebrated with a simple dinner at home, takeout pizza, laughter, and stories of the future they dared to dream of. For so long, hope had felt like a luxury they couldn't afford. Now it was real. As Emma and Noah's lives stabilized, Alex continued to play a quiet but impactful role. He visited the nonprofit regularly, not as a benefactor but as a friend and ally. He offered advice, made connections, and supported their initiatives. His influence helped secure funding for new programs, job training workshops, mental health services, and scholarships for families in need. One day, while they were reviewing grant applications, Alex paused and looked at Emma. "How are you holding up?" he asked. Emma set down her pen, surprised by the question. "I'm okay," she said, but her voice wavered. Alex leaned forward, his expression gentle. "You don't have to carry everything by yourself." Emma swallowed, the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. I'm trying to be strong. For everyone. You are strong, Alex said. But even the strongest people need a break. His words lingered with her long after he left. That night, Emma allowed herself a rare moment of vulnerability. She cried not out of despair, but out of the release that came from knowing she wasn't alone. Noah found her sitting at the kitchen table, tears streaming down her face. What's wrong? He asked, his voice full of concern. Nothing, Emma said, wiping her eyes. Just everything. They sat together in silence, the bond between them unbreakable. They had come so far, but they had done it together. Under Emma's leadership, the nonprofit continued to grow. She created new initiatives that empowered the people they served, giving them the tools to rebuild their lives. She also began mentoring young volunteers, sharing her story in the hope that it would inspire others to give back. One evening, she stood in front of a group of new volunteers, her voice steady but full of emotion. I know what it's like to feel invisible, she said, to feel like no one cares. But that's not true. Kindness matters, compassion matters. And together we can change lives. The room erupted in applause. As she stepped off the stage, Alex was waiting for her, a proud smile on his face. You're changing lives every day, he said. So are you, Emma replied. But life wasn't without challenges. The nonprofit faced budget constraints, difficult cases, and moments of uncertainty. There were times when Emma questioned her decisions, when the weight of leadership felt crushing. But every time she felt like giving up, she remembered why she had started. She remembered the people who had believed in her, the families she had helped, the volunteers who looked up to her, and the brother who depended on her. One particularly tough day, a funding proposal was denied, leaving the nonprofit in a precarious position. Emma felt the familiar grip of fear tightening around her chest. She didn't want to go back to a place where every penny counted, where survival was a daily struggle. Alex found her pacing in her office. Talk to me, he said. It feels like we're going backward, Emma admitted, her voice raw. All this work, and it's still not enough. It is enough, Alex said firmly. You've already made a difference. This is just one setback. We'll find another way. His belief in her never wavered. Together, they brainstormed solutions, reached out to new contacts, and found creative ways to keep the programs running. It wasn't easy, but they didn't give up. And when new funding came through, it felt like a victory earned through resilience and determination. As Noah prepared for college, he came to Emma with an unexpected proposal. I want to give back, he said, his voice steady. I want to volunteer at the nonprofit this summer. I want to help kids who are struggling, like I was. Emma's heart swelled with pride. You'd be amazing at it. That summer, Noah worked side by side with Emma, sharing his story with teenagers who felt lost. He became a source of hope, a reminder that change was possible. And when he left for college in the fall, he carried that spirit with him. Years passed, but the bonds they had forged only grew stronger. Emma became a respected leader in the community, known for her compassion and determination. Noah thrived in college, studying social work and dedicating himself to helping others. And Alex continued to support them, not as a distant benefactor, but as a true friend and ally. One day, as they stood together at a community event surrounded by families, children laughing, and lives forever changed, Emma looked at Alex. We've come a long way. We have, he agreed, his voice filled with quiet pride. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Music and laughter filled the air, a testament to the power of kindness, resilience, and connection. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the journey they had taken together. It had all started with a simple act of compassion, a few groceries paid for in a moment of need. But the ripples of that moment had changed everything. As Emma stood there, surrounded by people she had come to care for, she knew that hope was real, and kindness, no matter how small, could truly change the world.